see it online?
No, I haven't
It's
seen
online.
it. Okay. Okay, thank you.
You get Facebook, you get Facebook.
Yeah.
You just look there on Matthew's Ministries or our site.
Okay.
Let me know what you think.
Okay.
She's worked here as a long-term sub before, and so last year she was at Triangle University. I understand.
How do you like Steve?
Amber was
He
very
was
happy.
good.
She's
Very qualified.
Yeah,
I
very well
enjoyed
qualified.
listening to him. He did a
Very
very
smart
nice
guy.
job.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's, she came from that area toward Lansing. She got a job, I think, a whole lot, maybe. Yeah. Her fiance got married and all of that, and then she got a job. So they're both working at the same.
My son was on a crusade to get her out of the school.
Oh, was he?
I don't listen to many of his tirades, but he was not impressed.
Does anyone know if our
We're live, by the way.
Oh. I said, I didn't listen. I didn't listen.
Travis
Yeah, I
did
agree.
great.
So, she,
Yeah, would you?
Yes, I totally forgot.
You did it?
I was
For a while.
on the couch. I read my work packet yesterday too, had my whole day planned out, got on the couch. I was like, oh my gosh, I have a board meeting.
Since we don't have people waiting, I don't know if he is coming, sorry. I prefer to find out.
You know what they're talking about?
No, Archie. You didn't hear anything from him, did you, Chris?
I got a very number one last.
Oh, shoot, you didn't remember?
Yeah.
Oh, he texted.
I hope I just texted.
when did
you.
he do
A while ago.
Like January?
Yeah, I've got some,
I don't think that I ever got.
I'll get it to you, I have some. Because he responded back to the message we had about our subcommittee.
Archie.
Okay, well, I got that set, let's go ahead and get started, and then we can even ask you all. Call this meeting to order and pledge allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Yes. Welcome to the Union City Community Schools Board meeting. Our meeting agenda, thank you. Our meeting agenda is available for you to follow. The expectation for our board meeting is to follow this agenda closely. We operate under the Open Meetings Act and utilize Robert's Rules of Order to govern our discussion and decision-making process. There is an opportunity for public comment during our set agenda. We welcome the public to express their opinions during this time of our agenda. If there are questions about the agenda or the board meeting process, please seek out one of the board members for clarification. First up is the 2021-2022 proposed budget amendment, and Business Manager Sarah Lesson will present the proposed 2021-2022 budget amendment.
All right, hello everybody. Okay, so this is the presentation I put together. Is that like really loud? No. And this is just informative information about what I have in the presentation and what this is about. So we are required by law to have this public hearing, and in order to have everything go as it should, it has to be approved by July 1st. In this time period, I will go over the amendments for the school year for general food service fund and school/student activity fund, as well as review the proposed budget for our general food service fund and school student activity fund. And then the last portion will be about the state borrowing resolution. This just kind of explains different things of what you would have an amendment for in our revenues and our expenditures. I think we all kind of understand the ins and outs of what's covered in that. And then moving on to the amended budget assumptions. So I apologize, you can't really see the numbers at the same time in the budget as I'm going over this, but I'm going to go over it and then you'll be able to see the actual numbers in the next slide. So for this school year, I made some adjustments for our general fund. For local revenues, we had $33,922 additional grants. These are received for curriculum purchase, 3 different PD days, and then our college and career readiness. And this is like an in and out, so we paid for these things and we are reimbursed for these things. State sources, there's an adjustment of $95,458. That was adjustments in our June state aid report, so I went through the numbers and I adjusted what I had originally calculated. And then also we received an educational connectivity fund to purchase additional laptops. Federal sources, there's an increase of $290,101. And this is for adjustments from our ESSER 2 and ESSER 3 purchases. The way I did the budget this year is I didn't put any expected ESSER money until I had the expense side in it, because I didn't want it to appear, hey, we have all this extra money, because really we have to offset it with the expenditures. So this has what we should have for ESSER 2 and ESSER 3 this year. For our other financing sources, I had to include the loan we received for the buses that we purchased this year. So about $180,000 of that is related to that purchase of the buses and the loan that we received to purchase those. And then there's an adjustment for our special ed reimbursement.
I forgot to ask you during the other meeting, but what are the mechanics of the ESSER 2 and ESSER 3 fund? They come to us and we get to use them, or we still, when we're going to be reimbursed for those things?
So how that works is you're not supposed to request the funds until you've actually spent them. So some of the stuff that we're choosing to have our ESSER 2 and ESSER 3 go towards is, for instance, our like curriculum, director of curriculum assessment, 500 million title name. So like his position, portion of his position, then we had 8th grade position and our alternative ed position. I don't know those expenses technically till the end of the year. So to make it easier on myself, I haven't really requested any ESSER 2 or ESSER 3 until I know that, so that I don't have to go back in and keep requesting money. But how it works is it's simple. It's similar to title. You actually have to spend the funds first. Then once you've spent it, then you can go in and you can request for the reimbursement for the costs that you've expended.
The bottom line is that $290,000 is not in our checkbook yet, but you requested it or will request it.
Correct. Mm-hmm.
Do you have any reason to believe that it will not be here anytime soon after you requested it?
No. So it's the same system that title uses. And it's the same system really that we use for like our breakfast and lunch reimbursement. So it's a few days normally and it comes right in because it goes directly into our account. So it's fast moving, especially it's all approved, everything's good. That was a process. So then moving down to the expense side, the instruction has an increase of around $270,000, and that is due to ESSER 2 and ESSER 3 purchases. So I mentioned the teaching positions those go from that. And then we also had different items, curriculum that we purchased, that also comes from that same line item. Improvement instructional support has an increase in cost. That's really related to adjustments with some title expenses. We make an amendment every year where we go in and see what we've actually expensed, what there might be changes, and because of those necessary changes, they kind of change the line items that things were put on. There's also, we had to pay for an ELA consultant at the elementary for 4th grade this year. Next year we will not be paying for that, so that's like a one-time expense. And we had additional workshop and trainings for our employees across the different buildings. For operation and maintenance, we had an increase, and this is largely due to our third-party custodian company who used to have They changed the cost within the middle of the year of how much it was to have them do their daily stuff as well as it was for us a custodian. So that was originally not budgeted. Pardon me?
It was a substantial.
It was a very large increase, which really brought us to have a deeper conversation about bringing full-time employees back in-house. So the additional cost is for a month worth of having our now full-time night custodians that started working in June. And then there was also a supply cost increase, which for maintenance, that includes a ton of different things. So that's gonna include our costs that we would have for cleaning supplies, toiletry items, anytime Spencer needs to go to merchants and pick up a screw. You know, it's a whole bunch of different things that really are purchases that have increased in cost. And then our transportation services, I increased that to show the amount that we paid to purchase those buses using the loan that we received, as well as we've had an increase in our fuel expense within the last couple of months. And we had additional sub and training bus driver costs this year.
I didn't ask the question at the budget meeting, sorry, but in terms of fuel costs, do we contract any of that for a contractor, or do we just pay for whatever the rack price is when it comes in?
We pay, I believe we actually pay a little bit cheaper than the normal cost because we go through Warner Company. And I believe they give us a little bit more of a deal. When I look at the cost that they're charging us compared to just, you know, at the gas station for diesel, it's cheaper. So I do believe we're getting a deal.
But my point is, whenever we call and say bring us fuel, that's the
Oh,
cost. It's not, we don't lock it in early or anything.
no,
Because I do on the farm, but I don't know that I'd lock it in right now.
right, right. Well, and
No
honestly,
point.
I hadn't seen a huge increase until like the last couple of months, which I was quite surprised because really it had gone up. So I think they were doing us a favor, maybe. I mean, that's not the right words, but
Trying to hold off.
yeah. And then finally, for the technology, there was also an adjustment, and this was related to one of our ESSER purchases that required an increase on that line. So Chris, if you want to go to the next page, please, slide. Okay, so this first shows our revenue side at the top. If you look all the way over to the right, you can see that from the changes that were made, there's a $639,000 increase in revenue expected for this year. And then for our expense side, oh, it kind of cut off the bottom there. Oh, okay. So for our expense side, our projected ending fund balance amount is $2,056,709, which from a percent side is at 16%. So we ended at 19%, 2.1 million from this previous year, and now would be at, you know, 2 million with a 16% fund balance percent.
Column where you're looking at.
So it's not,
Keep up with it.
does anybody have any questions about this year's information?
I forgot to ask, but the bottom fund balance percentage excluding something that's cut off.
Yeah, that's so I realized that was something that was done before as it was included in there. But we're really kind of accounting for the revenue on the other side as well anyway, so I kind of feel like it's a silly thing to include. I still put it in there because that's the way it was before, but really I prefer to go by the 16%.
That's the reason.
So then this breaks down, if you want to look at that page, Dave, that kind of breaks down more what I was talking about.
What was our final student count?
968.
That's the final.
A final student
Final
count?
student count.
That's the blended count, sorry.
You know, what-
One between last fall and
and then the 5-year average.
I feel like it was a 9.7 or something,
I'm just-
right? Does
Well,
that sound
We're
right?
trying to get at how close we're to our estimate,
Oh, yes, it is.
and then we're, how far do
we
we?
were above
Yeah,
what was
significant.
estimated in the budget. And the budget was estimated at 940.
Yes.
So we were quite a bit above what was planned for.
Mhm.
That's fine. Because we're gonna talk about the next thing, which is next year's budget.
Right. One thing I wanted to kind of explain to you as well as one frustrating part about doing the budget is it's always an estimation, and I do the very best that I can because I have to give this information to you guys, but I also have to have it together soon enough that I can go through the process for the borrowing resolution. So I had to have this done by like early of last week. There's things that come in and out that I don't have control of. So I'm not saying like I think I'm super far off, but I just wanted to explain to you, it's really an estimation. And I wish that there was a different way to do the budget because you're just, you're never going to have an exact number because you just don't know all the information.
Is it also fair to say that you're conservative?
Very. About numbers.
And a budget is also just a plan.
So you recall that last year, how the fund balance.
Very seldom does a budget
Yeah.
have exactly like a plan.
Right.
So once the audit comes in, it's likely, hopefully, that the fund balance will be higher than.
Yes. And I did go through and I tried to make as many adjustments as I could to have it be exact, but there's still things that, that happen, that come in that I'm not always communicated with about everything, I guess.
I just want to remind everybody that's watching, though, that this board, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, requested the conservative. So if you're going to be wrong, we want you to be wrong in the right direction.
Right.
So we appreciate that. And I don't expect that after the audit, it's going to come in higher. I really like you taking the conservative approach. I liked it with the student count. I didn't like overestimating that. So I just want everybody to know that's not just a you decision. That was this body right here had requested that repeatedly. So.
I think especially coming into this past year, coming out of the pandemic, even though we were still in it in the fall, the 940 was an extremely conservative estimate. And was necessary, but hopefully things are going to be getting back more to normal going forward.
So thank you.
But even a conservative estimate could be off. Anybody's watching, there's a lot of unpredictable things that are going to happen, and you come out ahead or behind.
Every year between fall or the end of the school year and the following year, we lose overall somewhere close to 100 students in and out that we don't expect. We have kids that come to our district, kids that leave our district, and you don't know how that number is going to land, especially when how is it going to land on that particular count day? Because then after count day, you can have a bunch of kids come in or you can have a bunch of them go out. And so it is kind of every year. Things are up in the air. We have a very transient population. So,
And revenue can change from the state.
Right.
well, yeah.
That's the other thing is you have to estimate. We don't ever know that. Did anybody have questions about that information? Okay, so moving on to next year for our general fund. Okay, so for this next year, I listened to a lot of different things that were talked about with the Michigan school business officials, and they really were adamant that they think the minimum schools will receive this next year of an increase in funding is $435 per pupil. So I used that information, and that's how I based my budget for an increase in pupil next year. That is around a $414,000 increase. And then I also reduced our actual student count by 15. So the result in the increase per pupil, the but then the decrease in how many pupils we have is an increase in $227,530. There was also a reduction in our federal revenue, and that's really related to our ESSER 2 and ESSER 3 expenses. We have projected what our expenses will be for next year, and it's not going to be the same amount of cost as it was for this year, so that's why that was adjusted. And then there's a decrease. Okay, there's a decrease in other financing business. The decrease is $12,000 as we don't have a financial consultant. Sorry, I don't know why that's in there because that should not be in there.
I was gonna say, I don't think we've had
No.
it for a couple of years.
No, I don't have another copy of.
So just cross that out.
So you're predicting,
So ignore that.
Then
You
we'll
do
lose
not
15
need a
students,
financial
right?
consultant.
you're predicting we're gonna lose 50
I'm
students.
estimating.
Sorry that I think of these questions after the budget meeting we had an hour ago, but, so we are planning on doing substantial upgrades to the ventilation at middle school, which is gonna come primarily from ESSER funds. So you said that that's not in here, but.
I worded that funny, yes.
What's that?
I worded that funny, yes.
No, so basically what you're saying is, at some point, we're gonna have an amendment, either in January or whatever, that's gonna include all those things that we've already planned on.
Right.
And I think I've asked this before, but if I have, I apologize, I guess. But that specific project over there at the middle school, do we foresee the cost to outweigh the ESSER money we're getting? In other words, is there an egg we gotta swallow in terms of the expense that's gonna exceed our income even after ESSER of that project?
I can tell you that I added a sort of a margin onto the amount we put in my plan for the ESSER funds, over and above what I was told was a conservative cost estimate for PSI. So we do have a margin to play with because I wanted to make sure that if the cost came in above what they had estimated, that we would have ESSER funds available to cover that. So honestly, until we get the bids on the project, we don't know the actual cost. If the costs do come in higher, then we will make adjustments in terms of what we use, because we can make adjustments to the ESSER fund plan. So if the costs come in higher for that, we would move items that we have planned from ESSER funds to other funds, like the maintenance funds. And then in order to keep all the middle school project in ESSER. Because the reason we're separating it by building, because we are doing a lot of HVAC projects at the high school. If you recall, you have to pay Davis-Bacon wages for ESSER funds projects. So we're paying a higher rate for wages. And so that we're doing middle school as its own project. And that's why we're keeping it separate. So if the cost for that did come in a little bit higher, we would be able to adjust things and pay for other things through maintenance fund monies, through sinking fund monies, or if we had to through general fund monies.
So the reduction that should be listed there is a reduction in other financing sources, which is related to removing the purchase of the buses. I'm not calculating a note or a loan for purchasing the 2 buses that were last approved. So that's what that should be up there, not what's listed on the presentation, so I apologize. Moving down to the expense side, there's a lot of one-time purchases this year that, we purchase it and then we won't have the expense again. That includes 2 buses, middle school desks, chairs. Also, we're going to purchase some additional desks and chairs at the elementary, some projectors for the high school. We're looking at getting our library books back up and stacked, and then additional curriculum and textbooks. So those are like one-time purchases that will come in and come out. Another thing on there too, which I already mentioned, is the increase in supply cost. So that's another thing that I'm doing the best I can to guess what our increase will be. There's adjustment for pay increases for school employees, including retirement, FICA, and workers' comp, since the contracts for everyone but a few employees have been finalized. I was able to put that in the budget, which is nice. Normally, I don't have that information until the amendment. There's also an increase in dental insurance and life insurance / disability insurance, which is included. And since obviously the ESSER 2 and ESSER 3 revenue is removed, there's also the ESSER 2 and ESSER 3 purchases removed from the expenses. And I listed some of those things. Apple lease payoff, which we purchased the Apple lease, I think it was like 2 years ago. So we paid it off a couple years early, which is great. The security upgrade, virtual learning program, Bridges math curriculum, those are some of the things. And then for our transportation, I included a direct purchase of buses, which is around $189,000. That will be the one-time purchase, that we won't increase our debt, ongoing debt. We did pay off our last bus purchasing program this last year, so the debt service amount was adjusted down to $35,975, which is about $26,000 less than it was last year. And then, as I mentioned, I did an increase in supply cost across the board. And then this just shows the numbers for our revenue side. And then the next slide is about our expenditures. And you can see that we have 341, you can't see it on this. What you would be able to see is that we have $341,960 more in expenses and revenues. The reason I kept pointing out the fact that we have one-time purchases is because that's really what that amount accounts to. So if we took away those things, we would be pretty even. So even with the extra we have in expenditures, we've been really fortunate that we've been at a good standing with our fund balance, that we would be at $1,714,000, which is also 14%. And the goal was to be above 10. So I think that's in pretty good standing. Does anybody have any questions about that information?
I was just wondering, are we anticipating then no need for virtual instruction for this coming fall? So that's not something that will be available at the student, so as their request.
That is correct.
Still have extra licenses for that, though, extras.
I believe we've used all those up
Yes.
this year. We've had to actually pay for a couple additional ones
Right.
to get us through the year. Next slide.
Okay, so this is just kind of the breakdown that shows our estimated beginning fund balance with our revenues, expenses, and where we would be at with the deficit, with our remaining balance at $1.7 million.
And again, we'd be back up actually over that 16% if we didn't buy the buses
Correct.
out of the cash flow. But it seems to be a good decision to do that while we have the fund balance.
Because that'll be 4 brand new buses, correct?
So we will have 4 brand new buses.
Well, we'll only have paid 2 though.
We'll only have totally paid for 2.
Right.
The other 2 we will be,
5 years.
and depending on how the fund balance actually comes in after the audit, which we need to wait and see this fall. And once we have a better handle of revenue, we start to look at next year. Sarah might be interested in actually looking at purchasing more. Bring our fleet. If we could run 6 or 8, eventually, better buses, it would be nice.
The way that loan works.
You can't pay it off early. What were you gonna ask?
Yes.
You cannot.
That is mine.
But
I just saw his brain go like.
you could, but you're not gonna get any savings in the interest. You're gonna, you owe them the whole thing.
Worth the question. That is the definition of a good businessman. Raising the board member's mind.
Do you guys?
Same question 6 times. Got that mic warmed up. Sorry, go ahead, sir.
Do you guys have any questions about the general fund side? So moving on to the food service budget, I have not done an amendment throughout the year, and I think I explained when I did the amendment before, general fund, is I kind of wanted to see where we were. I wanted the consultant to work with Deb, kind of get a feel for, things that we could do, what needed to be purchased. So I didn't want to do an amendment and be completely off. So I waited till the end of the year. But our revenue is up quite a bit more than I had anticipated. Hold on a second, it doesn't look right.
Are you sure you didn't update these slides after you sent them?
No, that does not look right. What's the next page? What's the next one?
Because she sent these to me
go
earlier
back,
this
sorry,
week.
go back one more time.
And then I asked her if she had an updated version. She
Oh,
said no.
okay. Oh, no, it's still not right. Still not right. Okay. Well, I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna hand this to you guys so you can look at it while I pass it around. Okay, so this is actually for this next year. Not for this year. So the revenue for this year, don't look at those numbers. The revenue for this year actually has gone up. We received a lot more money back in reimbursement this year than anticipated to begin with when we started the program. The government passed some additional program that made it so that schools would receive more reimbursement, and I believe the reason is they want to make sure kids are being fed. So last year and this year now, we've been able to have a higher reimbursement than we would normally have. That's not going to be an option for next year. So this is the option that we had this year. So that has a higher increase than I had expected. We also made some changes in salary, and then of course that affects the benefit side, so that's included in there. I worked with Deb on making sure, because we had excess revenue and excess funds, that she had things that she could purchase that she needed, whether it be a small kitchen gadget, certain food, different things like that. So there's an increase in supplies and materials for that, as well as our purchase services, which was Glenn, our consultant. So that has had an increase in that as well. The result of all of that is that that we should be ending around 178,000 in our fund balance, which I'm happy with that because we were able to spend a lot of money, but we still have a revenue that's, we're really still at good standing, which I think is a really good thing because we can continue on looking at our food program and making adjustments that could make things better, things like that. So with that, I will move on to next year, which that is up there. I've decreased the revenue that we'll receive. This is the first year, fingers crossed, knock on wood, as long as everything goes normal, that we will have our CEP program run like it should be. We'll get reimbursed at whatever the normal rate's supposed to be. We won't have any extra incentive. I don't know where we're gonna fall, to be honest with you. The first year, it wasn't looking that great, and then things shut down and we received more reimbursement because they were just trying to make sure everybody was fed when things were shut down. So we have not had one single year, this will be the third year we've done that we've had a normal CEP year. So this is kind of gonna be community eligibility provision, which is when we have free breakfast and free lunch available to all students. So this will kind of be the year that we can see how things work out. And I hope with the program, that we're working on making some improvements, we might see higher numbers than we had anticipated before too. So Chris had already settled the negotiations with our cook side. So I've already included in here our increase in salary and benefits for this next year. I did decrease our costs with purchase services and supplies and materials because, like I said, I kind of had to purchase as much and everything that she could so we could get that fund balance back down to where it really needed to be as per the state requirements. And at this point, I do not think we'll have, we might possibly have capital purchase, but at this point, I don't have anything budgeted. It just kind of depends how things go. So based on all that, the ins and outs, we would have a decrease in 21,000, which means next year our ending fund balance would be 158,000, which is still pretty darn good. So, like I said, it's like a moving target. We don't know for sure how certain things are going to fall, but I'm trying to be conservative with my numbers.
Is there any questions before I ask you? I always ask one question. Do we know what our target is for the fund? It's kind of embarrassing to talk about this, but what should our fund balance be for food service program?
Food
You
service.
said that they have a threshold that they want us to be under. What is that number? Or
So-
percentage or what?
That's what your fund balance should be. So it's a moving target as well. Every year it's going to be different. This year we were able to be okay with our fund balance at that percent or that amount because our expenses are so high. So if you have lower expenses, it's going to say, well, you're not spending enough of what your fund balance is. And this last year, because so many schools received extra funds, a lot of us received the excess fund balance issue, I guess. So you just have to spend it down enough so that you're where you should be. And based on yours minus the capital outlay and the transfers out, times 3. No, I said that wrong. Divided by 9 times 3. That's what the amount of your fund balance should be. Because you're doing it for the 9 months we're open, and then you don't include the 3 months for summer. If you'd like more information about that, I'd be happy to send you some.
I'm just trying to figure out, so we have $100,000, is that good or bad? And, what number, where do we want it to be? Was what I'm trying to get at.
Yeah.
I'm expecting you to give me the answer necessarily. I was just curious what the rules were and what.
Yeah. Well, and unfortunately, it's not like a consistent answer. It's something that you have to look at every year. And I will be completely blatantly honest. I did not know this was even a thing until I got a warning about that, and I was like, okay, well now that I understand that, I can make sure I'm checking that.
I would say it is the case that every year we are closer toward being too high
Correct.
than we are to being too low.
We are currently fully staffed with all of our folks and everything else.
I believe
Yes.
is there one more position, or are we completely staffed?
Unless someone has left
Okay.
at the end of the year.
But this number
We're
is
fully staffed.
assuming we're fully staffed. that
Correct.
New wages and everything.
Mhm.
Thanks.
Does anybody else have questions about that? Okay. So this is our student activity account, which this accounts for, like at the high school, everything from youth and government to football to softball, all those different things. At the middle school, we have youth and government, and other programs, yearbook, things like that. The elementary, there's different accounts they have for field trips, the music program, things like that.
This is all fundraising stuff.
This
It's
is all
when
fundraising.
people, the groups bring in money and then they spend the money.
Mhm.
It's
And
not anything that comes out of any tax.
correct. So up until a few years ago, this used to be accounted for with the general fund information, but they have made some changes legally that requires it now to have its own separate accounts. So that's what I put in there. And really this is an estimation too. It just depends on the year if we have more expenses or revenue. But we never have like a huge expense because it's fundraising. So they're kind of working to make sure that we're not overspending.
Track of all the subcategories and all this stuff.
It is each school's secretary. And they work with me directly too. So what happens is every month I get the bank statement and I send the information to them so that they can then send me what they have from their like accounting program, and I go through and I make sure that it matches what it should. So there's like double checks really.
I'm still a little lost for not seeing this. This is all fundraising for the year looking at, or?
Yeah, these are the accounts, like in the office, she'll keep track of the class of 2023 has this much money. So when they bring in money they've raised, it goes into one account at the bank, at the high school. But she keeps a track of which group has which amount of money. The secretary does. And then likewise when it's expended for different activities. So Lou keeps track of it in high school, of all the ins and outs.
Like when I was teaching, when we worked with the seniors, and
Yeah.
that'd be their fund that they have, and it's just.
Yeah. Most of the sports teams have a fundraising account. There are other groups in there. There are some that have been in there for a long time because they didn't spend the money and they don't really exist anymore. But there's money in there. I think it's a little bit of interest.
Yes, that is true. There's a portion of the middle school and the high school that is with the MILAF. Don't ask me what that stands for right now because I'm uncertain. But a portion of that does actually make a little bit extra money every month because it's invested. Okay, so now moving on to the state borrowing. Okay, so for our state borrowing loan, I went through the process of completing the worksheet, which really gives you an idea of how much extra funds you might need at the beginning of the year to make sure that you can get through the time period you don't have the state aid and other funds. And based on that, I am suggesting a borrowing amount of 1.2 million. This last year, we were really lucky. We didn't have to borrow as much, but that was largely because the year before that, we had borrowed a lot. I believe it was like 2.5 million. So we had a lot of carryover this last year. And when I'm projecting and going through the year for expenses, I wasn't very comfortable with less than 1.2 because I don't want to get to a point that there's not enough funds and I get a call from the bank and all that. So 1.2 leaves us at a pretty good cushion, so that during the months that we don't receive the state aid or we have less in revenue, it carries us through.
Just a reminder, because I like to remember this, is that a lot of this is because all of our expenses are paid through the school year, but the state doesn't give us our money for last year until the last one is in September. So we still have 2 more state aid payments coming for last year. So we're always short of revenue.
And ironically, we have more expenses in the beginning of the year normally. So that's the information I had about the state borrowing, and that's all the information I have about the budget and all the other stuff. Any other questions? Thank you.
You do a very good job.
Yes, you do.
I understand what he's saying.
Yeah, that's good.
Thank you, Sarah. I really appreciate all the work that you put into that. I do appreciate that, as we all do. We'll move on then to public hearing on the proposed budgets or agenda items for public comments. This is a section of the meeting in which the public may make comments or share their opinions about the proposed budgets or agenda items. We ask you to limit your comments to no longer than 5 minutes per person to allow others the opportunity to speak. This is an opportunity for the board to listen to your concerns. It is not board practice to act on the concerns voiced during this meeting to allow for the board to do further research. Do we have any public comment tonight? All right, moving on. Addition or deletion of items to this special meeting agenda. We do have something that we're going to be adding on. board members received a copy of a letter of recommendation for a action item that's going to be action item letter D, which is going to be the hiring of a high school English teacher. That recommendation letter is before you, and the name is Mindy Maples.
We need a motion to amend the agenda.
Yes,
So
please.
moved.
Support. Give it to him. He needs it. He can live.
Any discussion? All those,
I mean, it's nice to bring in people who just come out of college, but it's also nice to bring people who have a lot of different experiences. I think she brings a lot to the table, from what I know.
well, we're just adding on at this point. We're not moving on
And
that.
I'm just telling you that, I'm saying
You're
this
just giving
now.
your opinion early. Thank you so much.
Because I'm reading more about it as we're talking and not bringing it.
You're out of order.
It's all right.
Thanks, there.
It's all right.
Thank you very much, Sharon.
All those in favor of this addition, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, the same, and that motion carries. We move on now to correspondence. Do we have any correspondence this evening?
It's that letter of recommendation.
Thank you so much.
Nope, that's it.
All right. Now we'll move on to our action items. First one, 2021-22 Budget Amendment Resolution. Board action is required to approve the Board Amendment Resolution as presented. I will entertain a motion for the same.
So moved.
Support.
Any discussion?
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you again. Any other discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying, oh, it's a resolution.
Resolution.
I caught myself just in time. Please call the roll, Kelly.
DeYoung? Yes. Searles?
Yes.
Miller?
Yes.
Labar?
Yes.
Mathis?
Yes.
Herman?
Yes. Move on to the 2022-23 budget resolution. Board action is required to approve the 22-23 budget resolution as presented. Entertain a motion for the same.
I'll do it.
Support. Any discussion?
I'm still excited that we're buying the buses like before. I know that we're losing some money, but I think it's worth it.
Amen.
Any other discussion? All right, Kelly, will you please call the roll?
Mathis?
Yes.
Miller?
Yes.
DeYoung? Yes. Searles?
Yes.
Labar?
Yes.
Herman?
Yes. Move on to the 2022-23 borrowing resolution. Board action is required to approve the borrowing resolution for the 22-23 school year as presented. I will entertain a motion for the same.
So moved.
Support.
Any discussion? Thank you, Sarah. All those in favor, please let Kelly call that roll.
All those in favor of.
All those that are opposed can vote too. Can't they? Can the opposed vote too, Amber? Because you said all those in favor have
I
to
know,
vote.
I know. Oh.
Okay.
I
Miller?
get it.
Yes.
Labar?
Yes.
DeYoung? Yes. Searles?
Yes.
Mathis?
Yes.
Herman?
Yes.
So your motion was right.
Yes. All right, moving on to hiring of a high school English teacher. Before us, we have a recommendation to hire Mindy Maples for an English teaching position at Union City High School, and I would entertain a motion for the same.
Move to approve.
Support.
Any discussion?
Already done.
Oh, yeah.
Please refer to previous comments. Thank you.
I do know her. She's wonderful.
That was quick.
She's
Awesome.
an asset to our
Great.
Very nice.
Great. So, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, the same. And that motion carries. We'll move on to discussion items, district goals report. And I'll turn that over to you.
So you have in your agenda a PDF file which contains our district goals from last year. We are required under Public Act 48, Section 98B to report on our academic goals, and those were included in our district goals. So this report provides you with information on each of our district goals Item 2C is the area where the 98B legislation falls. So I want to make sure we have that on the record, that we're addressing that. In the PDF, I hope you all had a chance to look through it. We just go through these goals quickly, the fund balance of 10%, we reached that. There was a memo from Stacy Gertler, the high school counselor, regarding the college career readiness plans for our students, for our graduates this past year. The graduation rate that is in there is the graduation rate for last year's class. We will not know the graduation rate from the year that just passed until this coming September is when that will become official. The four-year rate last year was, I don't remember the exact number, 85 point something, and it generally goes in that area between 85 and 90. With a class as small as that one was, it's very easy for it to drop down by large numbers. You have reports on the different academic goals for each building. There's a memo from each of the principals showing you what the goals were and what their scores were in each of those. And I'm just going to go through these quick, and then we can talk about whatever you want to talk about. There is the audit for our special education services is included in there. We received that. Actually, I just got that final version last week. They came with a version back in May, and they had some errors in it in terms of information. They had our graduation rate incorrect, and they had some other incorrect things that had to be changed. But overall, you can see the report was very good. They made several comments about our audit going better than any of the others they've done for other districts. They praised our teachers for their accuracy and everything they had done. It was actually nice to sit in here and listen to what an excellent job they feel like our teachers are doing. They also talked about, and I know we were looking at why we have a high rate of special education students. They did not feel our rate is out of line with other districts appropriate for us, and they also noted that our rate is going down based on changes we've made in our elementary regarding our approach to providing different supports for students by the classroom teacher themselves. So that they feel like is, right now we're in a good position on. So they were very pleased, and they had several positive things to say about our district in the area of special ed. The last section there is regarding our positive behavior of our students and the climate in the school district. And so 3A refers to the tiered fidelity inventory, and you see the memo from James in there, and that we met those goals, and I'm sure you'd be happy to answer any questions you would have about that. And then we had climate surveys, and we did a climate survey of the students and staff, and the survey results are in there as well. I hope you had a chance to look through those. We did those in May this year. I did not do a climate survey of parents. One thing that came up, and when we were trying to figure out how to do the climate surveys, I asked Patrick to do some investigation and look for a climate survey we could do. I asked James to do that as well, and they looked at a number of different options, and it's how we actually came across a company called Panorama. And they have several surveys in their tool, but they also provide a lot of other services in their software related to supporting our students both academically and with behavior. And we were very interested in moving forward with that. However, the timeline to get that implemented and use their surveys, which we thought would be much more accurate, it just didn't make sense for us to rush into it. And so I decided to put that on pause until we had more time to investigate. So we went forward with surveys. James had surveys from PBIS that I then took the questions from and did our own surveys, and we sent them out to students and staff. We were trying to think, I was trying to figure out how to inventory parents and get a good response, because James had done a parent survey. When did you do that one?
Last
That,
year. The end of last school year.
and got like 4 responses.
Yes, I think I might build it, but.
And so I didn't really have a prospect of actually getting a better response out of that. And I think what we might need to do is do it at a different time of the year, perhaps doing it on paper when they come in for conferences, something like that. I think we might get a better response, and I didn't want to do something that was going to get, a handful of people. The results wouldn't have any validity to them anyway. So I just decided not to do the parent survey at the end of the year. But you have the staff one and the student one with the questions that weren't part of that survey. So that's basically everything that's included there. If you have any questions or want to discuss any of it, we can talk about any part of it that you'd like to.
I just had a question for the 1 through 4. Is that listed? I didn't see it in there for what, obviously 4 is strong yes or yes, and 1 is strong no, but I didn't know if there was a definition for what 1 through 4.
It was agree, mostly agree. 4 down to 1 was agree. You either agreed with the statement, mostly agree, mostly disagree, or disagree. So when you look at, for instance, the last one, the last couple in the staff, it would say, is the school district is headed in the right direction. You would have 31 people, 32% of the staff said agree, and then 47% said mostly agree, 17% mostly disagree, and then disagree.
There's some things in here that are concerning, obviously. That's my question: is what are we going to do with the information? Because if we ask for it, we use it.
Absolutely, we're using this information. Absolutely going to react to it. A lot of the things in here are things that I've been well aware of and have been trying to work on through this past year. I don't think that there's anything in here that really that surprised me that I saw. I was pleased to see, in terms of the staff survey, I was pleased to see the number of staff who feel like we're generally headed in the right direction. I felt good about that. I broke it down and looked at, which is not included here, looked at some of the answers that are by building. I actually looked at which building the people were in, who said one way or the other, and so I have a pretty good sense of how the individual buildings are doing on a lot of these questions. And it's caused me to have some conversations about those specifics with those principals and try to see how we can address it. I really don't want to get into that here right now, the specifics of which ones I think have more issue than the other ones do.
Maybe that's something that we can incorporate into the next year's district goals as well. So maybe you should jot down the concerns that you have. Like one of the goals I feel like probably will drop off, the special ed. We were concerned, but if the ISD is not concerned about what our numbers are, maybe that doesn't need to be a district goal. So
I asked them specifically that question. I said that one of the reasons one of the things we want to do is determine if our special ed rate is too high, why are we so much higher than others? And they didn't feel like we were out of line in terms of what our numbers are. They were pretty satisfied with that. But as far as addressing some of these things, I do agree with that there are issues and things, of course there are. There are things that we've been addressing this entire year. And it is important to break the data down and look at it by school where we can in order to make sure we know where exactly there are things that need to be addressed. But I thought there were several positive things in the survey as well.
I thought most of it was real positive. The only one I'm really concerned about is, and maybe you can answer that, students at my school demonstrate behaviors that allows teachers to teach and students to learn. We have 40% saying that it's not the case. Either rating a 2 or a 1. I don't know if you want to address that or not, or
Notice that, or that's,
a concern of yours too.
I haven't seen it. Yes, you repeat it.
Pardon?
I haven't seen that. I've actually looked at that. I haven't seen it yet. So I couldn't hear what you said.
Okay. One of the survey questions is, students at my school demonstrate behaviors that allow teachers to teach and students to learn. And in the 1 and 2 category, it adds up to 40% that say that that's not happening in their classroom. That seems to be an awfully large number.
You know what's going on.
I don't think it's
It
fair.
never says building, it just says
Yes.
overall.
And Dave, I don't think it's fair to call James out right now.
I'm
in
not
a
calling him
meeting.
out, I'm just asking if
Well, you are
that's-
calling him out.
No, I'm
You
asking-
pointed right at him and said, I don't know if you want to answer or not. I think you need to direct your questions to Chris.
As a board member, I'm expressing concern of the fact that there's 40% of teachers that say that, and I'm not asking if he's doing something wrong, I'm just asking a question of, is that something that we're aware of? It seems like an awfully large number.
I think I'd rather answer that, and I am aware of that, and I think that is an answer I would have expected. It's actually 50%. There's 50% on each side of that, and I think all of our staff would say that there are things that take place in the classroom on a regular basis that make it difficult to teach, and that is not something that is unexpected to me at all. And we address that every day. We've addressed that in all the things that we're trying to do in terms of improving student behavior. All the steps that we've taken, those are things we're working on every single day. I do think we're making progress. I do think we are improving and making it so that it's a better environment and there are fewer disruptions, but there are always going to be disruptions and things that some students do that make it difficult.
So you think teachers are answering it's just an occasional thing, or if they're saying basically that this is common among, the question reads, students in my school demonstrate behaviors that allow teachers to teach and students to learn. I understand being a teacher that there are times in classes that you have that sometimes are very difficult to teach because of a student or two. I'm not blaming anybody, I'm just saying that
Absolutely.
it is something that just sticks out to me as if 40% of teachers are saying that, it at least sticks out to me as something that we as a board member and the staff should be aware of.
Absolutely.
It's not an attack on anybody.
Absolutely.
I also don't think it's an issue that happens only in Union City.
I didn't say that.
I just want to make sure that everybody hears that is a common echoed sentiment every district that I have friends in, work with, and it's not just at the elementary level or the middle school level or the high school level.
I
But
think-
student behavior is an issue.
In general, when people think about becoming a teacher, they think about the image of you would like to be able to go in your classroom and have 25 students who are there excited to learn what you're teaching, paying attention, and you could just teach your subject. That's what you want to have as a teacher. And so anything that doesn't meet that is going to cause you to feel like you can't teach. Except we have to remember that teaching is not just about teaching your subject. And it's teachers who go into the classroom with that attitude and have that perception where they have more difficulty in actually teaching, because teaching is about building relationships with kids and helping kids move along from where they're at to where they need to be. And a large part of that for a lot of our students is the ability to walk into a classroom and to have a goal, a plan in mind, and realize they're there to be educated and to pay attention, participate in class. And teachers have to bring kids along to do that. And it's a difficult thing to do. And so when somebody says, do they demonstrate behaviors that allow teachers to teach and students to learn? I would probably say no to that, because there are going to be kids in class who disrupt things. It's just an ongoing thing. But I think we're working very hard to improve those behaviors and to make it a classroom, make it an environment. One of the things that I talked about with the principals when I met with them at the end of the school year that I want to do for next year, and the thing that James and I have talked about is that it's difficult to expect students to have pride and respect for themselves and their school when you look around our buildings and you see things that don't show that we take care of this building. And you can't expect students to take care of the facilities and the things that they have and then therefore have pride and respect for themselves when they're in an environment that shows, that demonstrates that that's not the case. I've looked in our locker room at the end of the year, and it looks like someone's gone through there and trashed it. I mean, there are fixtures, faucets, drinking fountains that literally fell off the wall, and there's just a gaping hole there. There's a bulletin board that fell off the wall, and it's just, you can see the old pieces of paste. There is a lot of disrepair in our buildings in areas that need to be fixed. And that's where I talked with the principals, and one of the things Sarah's talking about in terms of replacing desks and chairs. You have staff chairs with the seat cushion hanging down, pieces falling off. You have desks with parts torn off. And so we're trying to get these things fixed and repaired so that they look nice. Because when you're in an environment where you can walk into it and everything looks well maintained and cared for, you not only try to take better care of that, but you feel better about yourself. And you feel like you're there for a purpose. And so we're going to be spending, I asked the principals to send me a list. Amber sent me a list this long of things that need to be fixed in this building. A couple of clocks don't work at all and things like that. And so I talked to Spencer about it. He's supposed to be going around and looking at and fixing a number of things. And so it's something we're really working on. And all of that, we get to ask James about. He knows about the effect that has on student behavior and whether students are paying attention and focused in class. The environment really plays a significant role in that. We have to do more to improve that, and especially while we have the resources to do it. And I realize we want to have a good fund balance for every year for operations. But while we have money available in fund balance is the time to try to address some of these things. Some of them can be paid for out of maintenance funds, and we're doing that. Out of the safety fund, we're doing that. But some of them need to be paid for out of general fund money. And that's why we have some of those one-time purchases in there for things like that. So yeah, student behavior needs to be better. I've thought about every kid in a uniform, you see that environment and, you think, but we all know that when you dress differently, you act differently. You just do, your behavior changes. We see it in the kids when they dress up for the dress-up day, for court and those kind of things. Kids act differently. And so environment, all of that plays a role in it. And those are all things that we're working on. So we're trying to hit it from a variety of angles.
I want to say you're saying all the right things, and I'm not pointing at it. I'm just saying that when you see the only thing that I see, that we're 1 and 2 are higher than that are the lowest.
I agree.
are something that we have to look at. And you're saying all the right things and doing all the right things. What I'm saying basically is that if we do these things, personally as a board member, a former teacher, I'd like to see those numbers decrease and they go higher to the other side, because
Absolutely.
teachers are the best judgment of their classroom.
Right. But
And,
this-
I understand what you're
This
saying.
survey isn't just teachers, it's any employee, so there are like, I think we had like 98 answers to the survey. So it could have been any employee included here. But I did want to mention before we go on is that tool panorama that I talked about, that we looked at. We did have an opportunity that I was contacted from the ISD that they had additional 31N monies available. Did we have anything that we wanted to purchase with that? And so I asked James to write a proposal to them to pay for panorama for 1 year. And they came back and funded it. And so we actually had a meeting today kicking that off to get it started. So we will have access to that tool all next year. We hope it's going to really improve a lot of the things that we're trying to do with there, and will provide us with better tools for getting information from our students doing these surveys in a way that will be meaningful and able to be used by all staff. So.
And finally, the final thing I want to say is that I only brought that up because it's the only one on the list that has a higher disapproval than approval. Otherwise, our district is in pretty good shape in bullying and everything else. It seems like things are under control. So my question always is, and the only reason I direct it toward James is he's the head of that department. I just wanted to make sure he was aware of it. No criticism on how he's handling that.
And
I'll make that straight to you too, Jen, so that you don't attack me again because you're too close. And you're very strong.
To be fair to James, I don't think James has seen this. He has not seen this. I did send these results out to the principals. I think I might have, because I sent them out one building at a time. So I did forget to send the whole thing to James as well.
You don't feel attacked, do you? Thank you
I
very much.
appreciate your question.
Thank you very much.
I do feel, I had a couple teachers come up in and say that they answered it, but they couldn't explain their answer. So I think to your point, like, you may have one kid in one class that really frustrates you and makes it so it's difficult for you to learn. But when you answer that survey, you have to answer one of those four. So I did have a few people come up and say, I just had to answer it this way because I'm just trying to answer it.
Yeah, they could still be a greatly effective teacher and do a great
And
job.
they could have
And it's just, but they're being honest, saying, well, yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
it could be better, but I still get it.
And I do feel like we have amazing teams, we have amazing people who are addressing these issues with
Right.
kids and creating. I think when Ms. Heidi's been here, she said, come in and look in my classroom and walk around. Because I do feel like when you walk through the buildings in your classrooms every day, they are environments you can teach in. But there are some kids that we have that are very difficult and challenging.
I believe that with this new tool, the surveys that we're going to get from them that are better surveys, better written surveys to help get us data. So some of those ambiguities where you're not sure about, we'll be able to get a better accurate picture of what.
Also being realistic. The way it's worded is not talk about the individual classroom. It talks about the school.
Right.
So when I was teaching, I would say in my classroom there was peace and quiet. But looking at some other teachers down the road, like you, Chris, I wouldn't know what's you at all. I would think that there was chaos going on in the building when there probably wasn't. So the way that question is worded is not talking about their individual classroom. It's talking about other classrooms in the school.
That's
But
right.
I'm just aware of it is all.
A panorama does have, so when you have different models basically, and when you go through these surveys, it breaks them up, and then you can drill into like if there's a concern with behavior. I don't have 6 out of the 36 questions are specific to that, and then you can really detail into like what is their concern with this. It makes it hard to do that. So we will be able to be like much more effective.
This was a short-term thing that we needed to do
I'm sorry
because of the
for so much
goal.
time, I really understood the questions, I'm sorry. I apologize.
No problem,
I
Dave.
will not do it again, I promise.
Dave, you ask any questions you want to ask.
Your comments and your question. Comments are, we have to be a little careful not to make these surveys so long that by the end the teachers and the students aren't. For example, this one here, just as an example, says teachers at my school keep their classrooms clean and organized. Is a question. Another question is teachers make an effort to keep the school building and facilities clean. So it's basically the same question. So I just would request that we pick the questions we care about and try to parse them down.
I took these questions from the PBIS surveys that James shared. I didn't want to just randomly take out certain questions.
I'm just
I
saying,
wanted to use the questions they had. I didn't want to be accused of, taking out questions that I thought we might not do well on and leaving in questions
We're
we would
beating the
develop.
survey.
So I left the survey as is, so
I
I
actually,
understand what you're saying.
that was one of my 2 comments. That was the first comment.
Okay.
oh, sorry, go ahead.
The second comment is, I hope that there's value in looking at this data over time. So let's figure out what questions we want. That's the same questions every year. But I'll let you ask your question, then I have my question.
No, I would just had a comment as well, and you were really close to it with your last one, and that is, I liked the, the intent and the amount of information that we got, but I'm really interested to see what it says next time and be able to compare it. To me, a survey is not a true survey until you ask it a second time after interventions have been put in place. And you see, did we improve? Did we not improve? That's where I'm looking at is next time.
And I don't know, was there a district goal last year to do a climate survey? Or was that
I
a
don't
new
remember
district goal
looking.
this
This is the first time I've seen a survey like this, and I really appreciated it.
All right. I didn't know if it was what part of the district goals a year ago to do a climate survey.
We haven't seen climate surveys do that quite detailed, but it was years ago.
Okay.
Well, I think this was you hearing people request it early in the year. I think there was a lot of requests about when talking about climate and making sure. So I think you did a good job, whether intentionally or subconsciously, but you did the right thing here with getting that out there. So thank you.
I think when you see what we're gonna come up with next year with that, and we're hopeful that Panorama will turn out the way we think it's going to, and then we'll, have a second year, maybe they'll come up with money to pay a second year for us too, but if they don't, we'll have to pay it, but that's the kind of tool we would like to be able to have to use every year.
On the superintendent evaluation tool, it does talk about climate survey. So this is
My
right
question,
up your wheelhouse.
not about the survey, it's about the audit.
Yes.
My question is, was there impartiality in the audit, or the ISD convened with the people who were overseeing those that work here and do the audit?
It was completely impartial. It was all people that don't work with our people here. None of like the staff that works here was involved in the audit. It was a completely impartial group. Believe me, they were intent on finding anything wrong that they
I just wanted to
could.
make sure that I think I've done the nails in charge of. Anyway, I just want to make sure it wasn't just boss coming in.
It was not. You talking about Eric?
Yes.
Yeah, he was being audited as much as we were.
Okay.
They were looking at the things he'd done as much as they were looking at what we did here. So. That's all I have on that, unless there are more questions.
Any other questions, comments?
I have 4 questions for James about the audit.
All right. Next is public comments. Section on the meeting in which the public may make comments or share their opinions about Union City Community Schools. We ask you to limit your comments to no longer than 5 minutes per person to allow others the opportunity to speak. This is an opportunity for the board to listen to your concerns. It is not board practice to act on the concerns voiced during this meeting to allow for the board to do further research. Any public comments at this second time? Seeing none, we will move on to our next information item, Superintendent Evaluation Tool.
You had in your packet a copy of the tool so that you could look at it and begin to think through how you would respond to that when we meet in closed session. I do want to just remind everyone that the way this is supposed to work is in closed session, you're supposed to come to consensus on each item and not share or bring together your individual. Because the minute you do that, that becomes something that has to be public, is my understanding of it. And then, as a result, when we come out of closed session, you would be voting it just on the final score, is all. Not on the individual items. It's just the final result that would be the public part of it. So that is all I had to say about that particular item. You do also have a memo regarding our elementary special education teaching position, which is open. And you see our plans for filling that position with a person who is going in to teach for tomorrow. So we're going to start out there with her subbing as a long-term sub, and then she must do 12 weeks in a regular ed classroom before she can go in to teach for tomorrow. So she's going to then fill in one of our regular ed classrooms where the teacher's on maternity leave. Once she gets her 12 weeks in, then she can get in to teach for tomorrow in special ed, and we will hire her as a teacher about mid-year. So.
I love her.
We both said that. We love her.
We think she's going to be an excellent addition to the staff.
Yes.
Again, Teach for Tomorrow is a program that was set up to help get teachers in the normal process.
It allows someone to start working as a teacher while at the same time then getting the education and the credentials they need to complete their certificate. I believe they have 3 years, I think, to complete their program once they start teaching. So they have to apply and be accepted in the program, and then we can hire them. She's going to be great.
She can come to yoga. Right now, they have 8 o'clock classes, so she can get there. They can work normal hours.
Okay, at this time, I would be entertaining a motion to go into closed session. And just to let people know, the only items that will be happening after we come out of closed session is the action items regarding the superintendent merit pay and superintendent evaluation. You're welcome to come back at that time, but those are the only 2 pieces of work that will be happening prior to adjournment of the entire meeting. So at this time, I'll entertain a motion to go into closed session. So moved. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, the same.